What's up, YouTube? Back at you with another video, another quick take. I got my guys, Percy, LeVar. What's happening, fellas?
Yo,
The most charismatic man is back for another episode. We're gonna light this one up.
Yes, sir. So we've got an article courtesy of NBC News, which says LeBron James, ESPN's Stephen A. Smith continue feud over NBA media coverage. The article goes on to say that Los Angeles Lakers star LeBron James and ESPN commentator Stephen A. Smith escalated their war of words that began earlier this month when James confronted Smith during a Lakers game over Smith's coverage of his son. James, appearing on ESPN's The Pat McAfee Show, criticized Smith for making personal attacks as opposed to discussing on-court play when talking about the NBA, and also accused them for exploiting their confrontation for personal gain. It says the back and forth began on March 6th when James sought out Smith for an animated conversation before the fourth quarter of a Los Angeles win over the New York Knicks, with both sides since confirming the conversation centered on Smith's coverage of James's son, Bronny James, whom the Lakers drafted with the 55th pick last June. It says Smith had been critical of Bronny James earlier this season, saying in late January that the younger James belonged in the developmental G League and not the NBA. I am pleading with LeBron James as a father. Stop this. Stop this, Smith said on ESPN's First Take in late January. We all know that Bronny James is in the NBA because of his dad. LeBron James hinted at his frustration with the media in late February, criticizing talking heads such as Smith when asked a question about who should be the face of the league. He says, "Why do you want to be the face of the league when all the people that cover our game and talk about our game on a day to day basis shit on everybody?" James told reporters in the locker room on February 28th. A few days later, James would confront Smith in person, an action Smith, who discussed the conversation on several platforms, would describe as weak. Then on Wednesday, in an interview released on ESPN's The Pat McAfee Show, James said Smith used the in person confrontation for more attention, claiming the ESPNer was on a Taylor Swift tour run of discussing the incident. He said he completely missed the point, the whole point, James said of Smith. Never would I ever not allow people to talk about the sport and criticize players about what they do. That is your job to criticize or to be in a position where if a guy's not performing, you know, that's all part of the game. But when you take it and you get personal with it, it's my job to not only protect my damn household, but to protect the players. And then Smith has since fired back on multiple platforms, first on his own podcast Wednesday night, then again on First Take on Thursday. And I'll just wrap it up with this quote, which says, "I just want to say for the record, LeBron James is full of it. And in this particular instance, as it pertains to his son, he is a liar." Smith said on his podcast, which was nearly an hour-long monologue about LeBron James. He also claimed he would have tried to punch James if the basketball player had touched him during their face-to-face in Los Angeles. He continues to lie to the world about what I said and who I was pointing the finger at. To regurgitate an obvious point, when I talked about Bronny James earlier in the season and I highlighted the fact that at that particular moment in time, he simply was not ready, I was calling out LeBron James. I suggested he be happy with the things that I haven't brought up. I never brought up, really never really discussed why you were not at Kobe Bryant's memorial service. I never really brought up or discussed why you did not attend Dwayne Wade's Hall of Fame induction when that man was directly responsible for you capturing a championship for the first time in your career. And it says Smith later clarified, as was reported at the Times, James did attend Bryant's memorial service, but was not shown on camera. All right, so LeVar, you up to bat first. What are your thoughts on this whole entire situation? Because I know we were talking about it a little bit before.
yeah. When it comes to the situation, I really have two main problems on LeBron's part specifically. The first one is the reasoning for him confronting Stephen A in the first place. Now, I understand that he had problems with the things that Stephen A said about his son, but number one, Stephen A wasn't the only person criticizing his son, and number two, most of Stephen A's point of LeBron's son was that he just wasn't ready, and that LeBron was setting too high of an expectation that his son might not be able to meet, essentially. So, with that being said, now the way that LeBron walked up to Stephen A. Smith, and everyone saw it obviously live on TV, you would think that he would have walked up to Stephen A. Smith for a more, I guess you could say, valid reason than just him criticizing his son, apparently. And as far as it goes with my second reason, it's just the fact that there's been people in media that LeBron has interacted with, been on teams with that have done things way worse than what Stephen A. Smith has done, but
Mm,
he's reacted in such a much lesser way. For example, when Jerry Jones, when it came out that Jerry Jones was in support of going ahead and discriminating against black kids from them getting into white school, of course, LeBron he did ask the media why they weren't asking him about this, but he didn't really say anything after that. He didn't really do anything. Obviously, you have Skip Bayless, who's considered a LeBron hater, who always was arguing with Shannon Sharp when they had the show back in the day. And then Kyrie Irving, a teammate that he had that posted anti-Semitic documentary, at least a link to it. And I mean, LeBron has never, like he said that Kyrie hurt people. That's all he said, but he didn't really give the same amount of energy that he gave to Stephen A. Smith. Bro came up to him and confronted him, made it seem like he was going to puff his chest out and do something to Stephen A. Smith. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, but where's the energy at for Skip Bayless? Where's the energy at for Jerry Jones, who's
mm,
probably done, like, out of everything that everyone's done, either him or Kyrie Irving have done, like, some of the most discriminatory, supporting some of the most discriminatory things that I'd ever seen. But you know what? When it comes to LeBron, he's gonna be like, well, people can do these discriminatory things. They can go ahead and say this and that and that. I'll give a reaction, but it's not gonna be that big. But how dare you? How dare you criticize my son? You're not even hating on my son. How dare you criticize my son? I'm gonna go out and puff my chest, and I'm like, okay, bro, okay, dude. This dude don't have, like. At the end of the day, I just see LeBron as being hypocritical. I don't think that he keeps the same energy with other people.
mm.
Um, and I just think overall he acted like a fool. Now, as far as Stephen A. Smith goes, I would just say that him talking about hands and stuff like that. I mean, I understand where he's coming from because LeBron puffed his chest out in front of him, but I don't really agree with him going on the Pat McAfee show or whatever he did and spread out information like that. He should have just at the end of the day tried to tone down the situation and keep it at what it was. But ultimately it's already the
Mm.
damage has already been done. So
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Now, yeah, Percy, I know you had an interesting take on this. So what is your thoughts on the situation? And then if you do have a contrary opinion to LeVar, what is that?
So yeah, LeVar, I was going to come on and agree with you, but after watching LeBron's interview with Pat McAfee, I changed my opinion on it. Not to say I think Stephen A. is an issue, but I think part of the thing that you're talking about, where he don't keep the same energy with certain people, I think, RG3, when he confronted Stephen A on his show, he made a point, and he's like, Stephen A, you're the biggest name when it comes to journalists, broadcasts, people in the sports world behind the camera. You are that guy. So for me, I look at it as, will Will Smith talk to someone who's a B or C level? No. But if you are a deadline, a A-lister, he will probably say something about you because you have that voice and that platform to change the narrative. Now, I think LeBron, part of it for him and what changed my opinion was he was talking about how, a year prior to Bronny getting to the NBA, he almost died. And, I can, as a Kobe fan, I never really cared for LeBron in the sense that Kobe was always been my favorite player. But he earned my respect with that interview because I feel like he finally let himself speak his truth, and I think it's probably because he accomplished what he wanted. And I think one of the things he was talking about was he's not mad that people criticize Bronny. I think for him, he was just, people are using Bronny as an excuse to target him in multiple different ways. And I think he's just fed up over it. Like, yeah, you could criticize Bronny's skills, whatever the case may be, but don't use it as an excuse to say, oh, LeBron is a bad father. Like, I think when you touch on somebody's, family, especially if their son almost died, they're gonna be a little more vigilant in their approach. And look, I'm not disagreeing with you, LeVar. I think LeBron, probably didn't have to step to Stephen A like he did, but I think Stephen A being who he is, making all that money with the platform he has, I think for him, it gets to him more because people talk about Stephen A. They don't talk about Skip. Yeah, Skip Bayless, I know who he is, but he's not Stephen A. And I think ultimately Stephen A is not wrong. I do think, LeBron has used his power and his influence to get Bronny NBA. No, there's no question about that. But also on the same time, on the same side, I can't get mad at him. Why? We see this all the time. White people always bring their children successful. We see, bringing back to acting, we see a lot of kids whose parents are famous. They get opportunities even though they stink, but because they're famous, nobody say anything. And I think with LeBron, I think all his point was, look, y'all can criticize him, but my plan was I don't care if Bronny shoots and beat Steph Curry in a 3-point contest. I just wanted to play my son before I retire, and he got to do that. And for people who are using Stephen A. and the LeBron beef to start doing think pieces on LeBron's family life and Stephen A.'s personal life, it's just weird. And I think they could just squash the beef. I think it was just a misunderstanding between them two, and maybe they can when LeBron retires, and they can probably patch the beef. But yeah, I just think this is being amplified for ratings, and because LeBron's just such a superstar, people are always going to look for any reason to tear him down, especially as a black man. So
Hmm. Okay. Well, for me, right, I think that I see both sides, but I think from the very beginning, I kind of lean more toward Stephen A. Smith and agreeing with him, even though I've been critical of Stephen A. Smith in the past, saying with that whole Will Smith shit that happened before. So yeah, I've had my fair share of shit, that I talked about Stephen A. But because my thing is this, it's his job. Now I'm somebody that I do watch, ESPN First Take, every so often, whenever I can, you know what I'm saying, just to kind of follow the NBA season because I don't watch NBA games like that unless it's the highlights and shit. So, and I've watched my fair share of their coverage on Bronny and LeBron. And I never felt like Stephen A. Smith said anything wild or out of pocket that would really make LeBron kind of react that way. Because when he said that LeBron James is a liar, what he was talking about was you said that Bronny is better than the majority of the players in the NBA right now at that time. That's what he said. So all Stephen A was saying is that the criticism that Bronny is getting is because of you, because you're the one that set the bar so damn high by saying that. And people are going to hold you to your words because you're LeBron James. So when Bronny's coming into the league and playing the way that he was, it's not a good look. And it came back around to bite him, in the ass. So are you gonna get mad at Stephen A. Smith for saying that? And my thing is this, like, it's Stephen A. Smith, bro. You know what I mean? Like, and this is what I was saying to LeVar. Like, people, specifically men, know who to play with and who not to play with. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't pick on the guy that. I mean, it's almost kind of like what Charlamagne said, about Birdman or to Birdman years ago, and he was like, "Well, why come at the radio guy? You got mad rappers, thug gangsters that are talking trash about you. I don't see you running up on them, but you want to run up on me." You know what I'm saying? He was like, "Yo, go handle the big dogs first before you come and holler at me." I understand that to a decent extent. If Stephen A. Smith says something about LeBron or Bronny that was wild, then I would understand. And I also get like standing on business. Like if somebody says something that I didn't like, yeah, I'm all for going and talking to him about it. But at the same time, I honestly believe that Stephen A. Smith didn't say anything that really warranted that type of response. And then apparently, yeah, like certain NBA players that are friends with LeBron, they don't talk to him anymore. They don't talk to Stephen A. Smith anymore because of that. You know, I don't personally see, what the big deal was. And the fact that it's so elongated now is kind of crazy. Now, I will say about Stephen A. that I don't like is that his first response about it was that he didn't want to talk about it. He was like, I'm only talking about this because the network, forced me to talk about it. So LeBron James is right in a sense that he is on a Taylor Swift tour talking about the shit because you haven't stopped talking about it since then. I can understand if that one video on it was going to be it, but that's not the case. What I really didn't agree with was that he said that LeBron James pulling up on him was a weak move. Whether it was weak or not is a different story. Do I agree with it? No, but would I call it a weak move? Not necessarily. If you truly felt that it was a weak move, you should have said that to his face. Because Stephen A. Smith is kind of seems to strike me as the kind of guy that will say a lot of things on camera and possibly behind closed doors, but when he gets in your face, he's not going to have that same type of energy or he's going to be mad respectful. And it's like you won't have those types of problems if you just keep it respectful all the way around. Because I'm a firm
Yeah.
believer in You don't have to be a tough guy or the biggest baddest thug gangster in order to avoid certain situations. My thing is this: if you are mindful about the way that you move and how you treat people, like if you treat everybody with respect, you shouldn't have any problems. You shouldn't have any problems. No one's gonna want to get in your face if you treated them with respect. It's like, what can somebody say about me? Nigga, I try my best to treat people with respect. I treat people the way that I want to be treated. And if I'm a public figure and I say something about somebody on camera or on the mic, then I'm gonna stand on business if they get in my face. Nigga, I'll say it to them. So it's a matter of don't say anything on camera on microphone that you wouldn't say to that person's face. And I feel like being that Stephen A. Smith is a grown ass man and you feel like it was a weak move, don't say that after the fact. You should have said that on your show. That's what you should have said.
Right.
Because he was like, yo, that wasn't a basketball player that approached me. That was a father. Then you should have honestly, I feel like if Stephen A. Smith kept that same energy this whole entire time, LeBron wouldn't even have said anything on the Pat McAfee show. Because what could he say? If Stephen A. Smith had just said that and been like, yo, I'm not talking about it no more, that's it wouldn't have been nothing. But because Stephen A. Smith kept it going, I see why LeBron has kept it going too, because you keep talking about it. So
Yeah.
that's my thoughts on that.
Now, before I let you go, LeVar, I want to circle back to and it is separate from sports, but you remember the whole Oscar slap thing, Will Smith, right? And
Yeah.
people, lambasted Will Smith for what he did, right? But my point at that point was people, especially when you're A-list celebrity, when you're LeBron, a Denzel, Will Smith, such and such, people like to criticize, talk down on you, hate on you, and say things about you. Not so much Denzel, I'm gonna keep him out of it. But people like to do anything in their power to discredit you. And at some point you get sick and tired of sick and tired. Now, I 100% agree with a lot of things Stephen A said. I do think, yeah, I think LeBron, put a little pressure on his son, with the comments he made. But then again, what parent wouldn't hype up the son? How many parents say my son or my daughter is going to be the next president of the United States? That's just a parent, and I get it from an analyst, a journalist. Yeah, you got to be critical on Bronny's, his journey in the NBA so far, but there's a criticism, and then it's also, oh, I'm gonna just crash out on this dude because LeBron hyped him up, so we're gonna have to take him down the pecking order. And I think LeBron, again, I think when his son almost passing away. I think he's just going to be a little more hyper vigilant on it. And I think that people who say LeBron is wrong, and I'm already seeing headlines, LeBron is coming off unprofessional. Well, I don't think he is, because at the end of the day, people often say, I'm a parent first. Yes, he's a basketball player. Yes, he's an A-lister. Yes, he's the one of the biggest faces of all time in the NBA. But his son is in the league now. And whether you like that he brought his son or not, that's your choice. But, at the end of the day, I can't hate on him because, like I said, we've seen this time and time again. A lot of people get opportunities because of their parents, because of their lineage. And it's just people were hating on LeBron because he's a black man who got his son in the NBA, and because his son may not be living up to the expectations of a superstar yet, they're going to try to use any way to discourage LeBron because, oh, well, you brought your son. Why is he not shooting 30 points a game? It's like, at the end of the day, Bronny is a young man. He's still trying to find his foot. Nobody, yes, a lot of NBA players, when they start, some of them start off hot. Not all of them do. Not everybody's a Steph Curry coming in, hitting 30, three-pointers out of 32 shots.
Right.
So, I think people are just, I think he's just tired of people, jumping on Bronny for the sake of,
Yeah,
oh,
but
because LeBron brought him in.
yeah, but if you don't mind me interjecting, I do think he's tired of Stephen A. Smith talking about Bronny.
Oh, of
Because I
course.
because I agree with LeVar what he said earlier. It's like, yo, if 50 people are saying shit about your son, why are you only talking to one guy? Specifically addressing one guy when there's 50 other people that have said the same thing
Yep.
about Bronny, if not worse. So what do you
Yep.
so what do you say to that? Because obviously I see you're on LeBron's
Yeah.
side as far as the situation, but think about it though. That's like if I'm a movie reviewer and you're an actor, and then the general consensus is that people don't like your most recent film, and I've been covering your film for the majority of your career, but for some reason, out of 100 reviews, you want to respond to me. So clearly there has to be a lot of contention there with me and you if you're only talking about me and you're only
Yeah,
responding, you're only running up on me. But it's like, yo, what about all these other people that probably said worse? And I've heard people say worse. I don't remember these guys' names because obviously they're not as big as Stephen A. Clearly, but I heard people say,
right.
yeah, flat out, yo, Bronny doesn't deserve to be in the league. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I'll say I'll let LeVar go right after I say this. I'll say, do you think, and I like to use this analogy because we all, when you get to certain status, you don't care about the little people. And Stephen A is the top. So someone like LeBron is not going to address some no-name reporter who's talking about his son. He's not going to address someone who may not be as famous as Stephen A working for ESPN. He's going to go to the top dog because LeBron is the top dog. So it's like, will Bill Gates address a millionaire? No, he will address a fellow billionaire in his tax bracket. And I
Hmm.
think, granted, I don't think Stephen A is making as much money as LeBron, but he's very well paid. He has a big platform. He only started his YouTube channel, Stephen A, I think like 10 months ago, and he already has almost 2 million subscribers. So
Hmm.
for him, you're the voice of ESPN. You have a major YouTube channel. People listen to your takes every day. Whatever segment whatever you do, people cover you. You're a A-lister at this point. So whatever you say is going to be criticized and amplified because you're Stephen A. So, I just real quick, I'll use that as an example. You think Denzel is going to go to some C-level entertainment company that says Gladiator 2 is trash? No, he don't give a damn. But if Deadline or if one of the top entertainment magazines says something, he might respond because they're the ones that have the power and the resources to, whose voices are amplified. So I'll just say that, but I'll let LeVar go.
Yeah, LeVar, what do you
Yeah,
think about that?
yeah. As far as it goes with like the names of people that LeBron hasn't confronted, I mean, I agree that Stephen A is probably like the biggest name that has ever criticized LeBron. I would say Skip Bayless in his prime, like maybe a couple years ago before Skip and Shannon ended, he was definitely on Stephen A's level in terms of just notoriety. He was known as LeBron's hater, and he said like I don't remember every specific quote that he said, but he said some wild things about LeBron, way wilder than anything that Stephen A has said. And to be honest, like it's not like Skip Bayless is much more of uh, like threatening looking person than Stephen A is. So I don't understand why he's never confronted Skip Bayless, number one. But as
Because
far
he's
as it
white.
goes with just LeBron's motives for, like I said, what he's done against Stephen A, it's like LeBron has an issue when it, and I mean, it's common to a lot of people, but especially for someone as big as him, he has an issue where he doesn't really know how to distinct criticism from hate from playing out meat riding. Now, when I say meat riding, when it
Hmm.
comes to people like Shannon Sharp and Nick Wright, they are some of the biggest LeBron supporters I've ever heard. Now, I haven't heard their specific takes on Bronny, but let's say, for example, you just have any reporter that says like agrees with what LeBron said about his son being better than like I believe he said like 80% of the people in the league or 50% of the people in the league, anywhere along that. Let's just say that someone did say that. I don't think that LeBron is going to be the type of person to go out and kind of like want to speak the truth. I know, like, if I had a son and um, he was playing in the league, I was LeBron James, I was so great, and I said my son could live up to this expectation. Now, number one, I'm gonna have to be realistic about it. I'm not just gonna go ahead and say that someone can be on this level when they haven't done anything yet, because that's gonna be inviting criticism. And if you can't handle criticism, you should have never said that in the first place. But also, with that being said, when it comes to people meat riding, let's say for example, someone meat rides Bronny James. I mean, I have never heard LeBron like cut down and like criticize his own son, be like, you know what? I don't actually think that my son's done enough right now to prove that or to say that he should be elevated above 80% of the league. I don't think he's done that yet. But like I said before, let's just take it to an example of like I'm sure y'all remembered about the Harry Styles situation when people were calling him the new king of pop, for example. And Chris Brown, when people were calling him like the new king of pop too, over Michael Jackson, and I believe he said something along the lines of, "I could never like hold up to Michael Jackson's shoes or something like that. Kind of cutting down the meat riding, I guess you can call it. LeBron James, on the other hand, I've never heard him cut down any meat riding from Shannon Sharp, from Nick Wright, from any of those people. But when it comes to criticism, how dare you talk about my son? How dare you say this and that? I'm like, bro, come on, man, come on. It don't make no
Yeah,
sense. But
yeah,
yeah, at the end of the day, I just say that, like I said again, LeBron shouldn't have done that to Stephen A. Smith. Um, his motives are lacking. The reason for doing that just seems pretty dumb and stupid. And he's literally like played with people, done heard things about what other people have done that have been way worse than what Stephen A. Smith done, and hasn't kept the same energy.
yeah.
Straight up.
I, you know, no, you make a good point, LeVar. I just say, to address something real quick that you mentioned. You was like, I'm forgetting what you said, but something Stephen A. said was, hey, when LeBron first got in the league and his mom was getting involved, he would tell his mom, stay out of it. Sit down. I got it. Because I'm a man amongst, professional players here. I can handle it. And then he was like, well, LeBron is turning around now doing the same thing. But, he's doing the exact same thing his mom did. But I would say, oh, and I remember what you was talking about. LeBron is at a different time. His mother wasn't a superstar NBA or whatever athlete. He is now. And I think when you're younger, when you don't have, a lot of people in your personal life knowing what you're doing, and you could take the criticism. But when you're further along, and now your kids are getting becoming adults now, and now they're able to take some of that spotlight from you. I think you're going to be hyper vigilant on protecting your son. Regardless, like I said, I don't think Bronny is free of criticism just because LeBron is his dad. But I think he just looks at it as like, yo, y'all been dogging me for years. Now y'all doing it to my son. He just almost died last year. And, y'all think this is a game. And I think at some point, I think Stephen A. got it the worst because of his public profile. But I think, and it's like the Will Smith thing. People get to the point where it's like, all right, I don't mind you talking about me and dogging me. And even if you criticize Bronny, that's cool. But some of y'all are trying to use this as a scapegoat to start using this as a personal attack. And I think he just got tired of not Stephen A, but I think he just got tired of journalists poking and prodding, starting trouble, looking for headlines, trying to get him to respond. And, it's like Will Smith. He got tired of people talking about his wife, his marriage, and, Chris Watt, unfortunately took that famous slap. But I don't think LeBron is going to beat up Stephen A. I don't think that was his whole
No.
point. I think he was just tired of people using LeBron as an excuse to poke at him, poke at LeBron, poke at his family, and we can't cherry pick when other people get to bring their kids in and be successful. But when I'm not trying to make this a race thing, but we don't really see a black man of LeBron stature bring his family in, and now that he's doing that, he's seeing people using this as an excuse to say all types of crap, and he's just sick and tired of the nonsense. So
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that there's a lot of people that hate on things such as nepotism when it comes to different races. I really think that as far as it goes with like I said before, when it comes to LeBron facing against the criticism and being hyper vigilant to it, I think that one thing he can do to minimize that is not feed into the frenzy to begin with. When he says that his son is going to like better than 80% of the people, he's already feeding into the
Thank you.
criticism that he's so
Yeah. That he
supposedly does.
wanted. That he wanted because you're asking for
Yep.
that by saying those types of things. So when
yeah,
people do say things in response to your alleged predictions or projections for your son's performance in the league and it falls short, how can you be mad? How can you
Yep.
be mad? And Stephen A is kind of right because he's like, yo, I never talked about you as a father, or at least originally, because I feel like you're implying something by saying, oh, well, you wasn't at Kobe Bryant's memorial, you wasn't at Dwayne Wade's Hall of Fame induction. Like I feel like you're now saying that he's a bad person by not doing that. So you're saying it without saying it, and I think that's why it's probably going to keep going. But continue, LeVar. My bad.
Oh yeah. So I was basically just getting to that main point about LeBron kind of just feeding into the frenzy. To be honest, if you ask me, I don't really think that I don't really think that LeBron cares much about like his son's criticism as much as it may have seemed when it came to him confronting Stephen A. I just think he cares about the criticism as a whole. I think if to be honest, I think he was just trying to puff his chest out to quote unquote intimidate other analysts to make them not want to talk about him as much or not spread these quote unquote narratives. But it's like, bro, you're feeding into these narratives. And to be honest, if it weren't for the narratives in the first place, LeBron wouldn't even have a big name that he has, and he wouldn't even be recognized as one of the best because it all comes down to narrative. If it wasn't about narrative, he wouldn't be recognized as King James. And that's why I said earlier that when it comes to the meat riding, he loves that. You ain't gonna see him talk about like when people say, for example, that he's better than Jordan. Like even before he got like the multiple rings, when people say he was better than Jordan and all this, better than all these other people before he's done anything. I mean, I didn't see him knocking down any meat riding when it came to that. But when it comes to just a bit of criticism, that's too much for you to take. It don't really make that much sense. And
Mm-mm.
like I said, at the end of the day, it's all narrative based. He knows deep down inside that he just cares about the narrative that fits for him. He's just a biased person at the end of the day. Now I don't
Who
agree with
LeBron is a
Stephen
biased
A.
person? You said
Yeah,
okay.
basically when it just comes to the narratives, when it comes to the narratives, because he's gonna like when it comes to uprising his narrative and talk about him being King James and all this, even before he did all the accolades that he's done now, him being perpetuated as being better than Jordan. He like, for example, skipping Shannon Sharp and Nick Wright are basically saying the same thing, talking about LeBron. He's better than Jordan. Can't mess with LeBron. All this and that. And I'm like, okay, that's cool and that's a good narrative to push out for him. But you can't be like confronting people like he did to Stephen A. Smith when dude just say that your son is like you're setting such a high standard for your son that he might not be able to reach. It just seems a bit biased to me when it comes to that narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Are you going to me or you want
No,
me to
no, no.
go?
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Levon, like I definitely get your point. I think, well, first I'll say this: anybody who's highly successful, when you compare them to some people, they ain't gonna acknowledge it. Of course, no person is gonna turn down acknowledgement, and I say that about anybody, us included. If someone say, yo, D, your acting is just like Will Smith. You ain't gonna say no, I'm not.
Mhm.
You gonna enjoy it because people enjoy your work. No, I'm not saying you're wrong, LeVar. I'm just saying that I think LeBron, for the longest time, like I said, Kobe is my favorite player of all time. Um, and I think that for him, I think for 20 years being in this industry, people have, and I've seen the headlines, people always looking for a reason to get him. And he sees how, you know, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, they get called the angry black man because when people dog them, they go after them. And then what happens in the media? Oh, Russell Westbrook, we knew he was that real black man, that dude from the projects. He has an anger attitude problem. And it's like, I think for him, I think it's just I don't think Stephen A is wrong and criticizing LeBron and Bronny. I think he just got the brunt of his frustration of 20 years plus now, his son in the NBA. And I can't get mad at him because at the end of the day, I'm not a parent, but 20, 30 years from now, if I have a child following my footsteps, I may not enjoy seeing the criticism I got they getting. And I think, for him, I think he's just, especially now that he's winding down and his son, he might rise up to the occasion or he might not. But I don't think he wants to leave the Lakers, leave the NBA with people talking about, oh, yeah, Bronny. Cause I see the comments on Twitter, man. You see those comments, Bronny trash, bro. LeBron raised
A scrub.
a scrub. Yeah, he can't live up to the hype. He trash. And it's like, I get it. Like people don't like Bronny and they think it's nepotism, but at the end of the day, I can't hate a man for bringing his son into the game. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
you could
LeBron James is
say
a great dad. I was happy for him.
absolutely. And I get what Stephen A said about, oh, there's somebody who's better who could have taken that spot over Bronny, but Bronny only got it because LeBron is his dad and LeBron pushed it. But it's not like LeBron came out and said, "Yo, I want $100 million and Bronny. If y'all don't satisfy these demands, I ain't getting." He just said, I want my son. If you want me, you got to bring my son on. And his son is in the G League. So it's not like, Bronny's taking up another great player's, time on the bench in the actual NBA game. He's in the G League now. So, like, I just think that, people I've said this before. It's hating. People hate the fact that a successful man brought his son in, and they hate that Bronny got the opportunity that they wish they got, or they never had a dad in their life to push them and talk about them in a way like LeBron talks about his family. And people just be hating on that because they never experienced that, and that's why for me, I'm not hating on LeBron because yeah, I may not have grown up with a dad like LeBron, but I can't hate a man, especially a black man with a loving family. He's never been in trouble. He don't be out here doing drugs and act like a criminal. Like the only bad thing he did was bring his son in. I'm not mad at him for that. But I'll also say real quick before I'll say Stephen A. And to your point, Dimitri, Stephen A. has been dragging us on because just yesterday after he did the RG3, I believe his name is interview, he did another hour long video about LeBron, and then he did another 30 minute. It's like at the same time,
It's
yeah, like
ratings,
Steve, yeah,
ratings, and that's his job though. That's what I'm saying. Like he's just doing his
Yeah.
job. He's just trying to secure the bag for ESPN because I believe him when he said like, yo, initially he probably wasn't gonna want to talk about it, but his bosses, because he works with people, they said, yo, you got to talk about it, and that's what he did. So he's making the network more prosperous by milking it. And LeBron just added more. He just fanned that flame again. So really, Stephen A. Smith is getting what he wanted. Because more people are talking about him. They're talking about this is you. We talk about it. You know what I'm saying? So it's
yeah,
it's working out for all parties involved.
yeah. Everybody, well, yeah. I hope they settle the beef, and I think shout out to, like I said, no matter how you feel, shout out to LeBron, shout out to Bronny, because at the end of the day, I like seeing our fellow people win. He's winning, Bronny's winning, he's making money, and I'm glad that Bronny survived his heart attack because LeBron probably would have retired and all that stuff. So I'm not gonna hate on the man. He did what he had to do to get his son. He got his wish. I ain't mad at that.
Yeah. But on that note, what are your thoughts? Please be sure as always to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.